Welcome to Connected Conversations. I am Elena Petrova, founder and CEO of Adastra Inc. Tune in as we share inspiring stories, connect with local heroes, and discover solutions that uplift us. Well, welcome to Connected Conversations, Amira.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to see you again.
We started this about a year ago, talking about communities. That was Dent community that we met.
Yes, absolutely. And it was amazing. What was it, 3 days that we had together? And I love that here we are in conversation and in community still a whole year later, almost 1 year to the day.
Yeah, and that's precisely what the community means, right? You enter the community, you spark the conversation, and then it continues.
That's right.
I do remember that night because it was the very last night. We were sitting at the fire pit with the glass of red wine, and to be completely honest with you, that was the end of that incredible event full of thought-provoking discussions. And I learned so much from you because I was saying that, again, I wasn't born in this country, and there are so many issues that puzzled me for many years. And you so simply put it into just those complex concepts that you lined up into the ways that, well, seventh grader could understand. And I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what are you working on today?
Well, thank you. First of all, I received that, and that's beautiful because that's what I try to do every day is to break down those really complex conversations and ideas in ways that real people, everyday people can just have a conversation about them and increase our understanding so that we can then do something. So thank you for reflecting on our, night across the fire pits with our wine. And what I'm doing today is still very similar work to what I was doing a year ago. I often describe myself as a behavioral communications consultant, author, professor, and your fearlessly authentic bestie as well. Actually won an award last year, 2024, from Leaderology for being a truly authentic leader in corporate spaces where, who we truly are and our chosen selves is not always celebrated sometimes because there's definitely a certain mold and I think decorum for what an executive is meant to look like in the world of corporate America. And I think I push the envelope on that a little bit. But today I still get to help people understand complex issues that touch everyone's lives. I am a professional communication strategist and I work at this really interesting intersection of healthcare, diversity, equity, inclusion, and employee engagement. And so the world of healthcare, we are all patients at one point in time. Many of us will be an employee at one point in time. And diversity, equity, and inclusion, that means all of us. We all have so many layers to our personhood and our identity. And I get to help shape the stories that are told around those areas and the actions that companies and leaders take, and it impacts so many different people's lives.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today, there are a lot of conversations about rebranding it, and how do you envision it? Because again, to me, diversity, equity, and inclusion does not mean that it's about minority groups or minority communities. It just means that all of us included to the table and to the discussion. What is the view today in today's climate?
I am disheartened to hear the conversation of it, all the pushback to eliminate and regress the progress that we've made, but I'm also still hopeful, which I think many people right now find surprising. But I'm hopeful because I think that so much of the anti-DEI rhetoric and pushback right now is in direct correlation to the progress we have made, right? I think back to, it would be, about 5 years ago, 2020, when, so many people in our institutions, whether you're government, nonprofit, or business, woke up to the ideas of diversity, equity, inclusion. This field of work isn't brand new. Many of us have been in the thick of trying to advance and do this work for years, back to the civil rights movement and even before. But the larger public, the general public, became so much more aware of diversity, equity, inclusion as individual words and as an acronym, DEI, back in 2020. And the way I try to describe it to people is that diversity, equity, inclusion is truly for everyone. And so I often ask people, and I'll ask you, have you ever heard of curb cuts?
No.
So
What is it?
curb cuts, think about you're outside and you're walking on the street and you're at an intersection, right? A stoplight, and you push the little button to wait for the little signal, the little man, so that you can walk across. Look down, those little cutouts. It's like a little divot. Sometimes they're yellow, the most often yellow, sometimes they're gray, but that's a curb cut. And I bring up curb cuts because curb cuts, at least in the US, were instituted way back in the 1930s, I believe. First, it was actually, we happen to be here in the Bay Area recording this, and I live in the Bay Area. And right outside of the University of Berkeley, there were students who were people with disabilities, and there were also veterans who had recently come back from war. And the veterans and these students who were either in wheelchairs or had walking canes or other kinds of mobility challenges had asked the city of Berkeley, California, to address the sidewalks. The sidewalks were very high, and it was very difficult for them to experience the outdoor environment, to walk, to play, to get that fresh air and exercise. And the city was taking too long, as they often do. And so these students from Berkeley and these veterans got together, and they went out into the city and they cut out the curb cuts. And the idea with curb cuts is that this solution was for a very specific population, right? People with disabilities could not experience the outdoors. And so they went into the city, they created these curb cuts. And what happened was these curb cuts ended up being useful to so many more communities and people. Think about children on bikes or skateboards or roller skates. Think about caregivers pushing a stroller with a little child. Think about people walking their dogs. These curb cuts made it easier for them to experience the city, to experience the outdoors, and to get exercise as well. And so curb cuts, I think, helps to paint a real world picture with a item that many of us have experience with. Many of us have crossed a street, so we've experienced a curb cut. And curb cuts, it's something you wouldn't think about. When I ask people, most people have never heard of a curb cut, that phrase, that term, and they couldn't name what those little cutouts at an intersection are, but they are benefiting from the curb cut and from its existence. So we solved a challenge that one community was having. The people who were, at the time, I would say one of the most marginalized communities. We said, who has a challenge? What is it? How do we fix it? And solving for their needs helped to solve for the needs of so many other people in communities who may not even have known that this was a solution that could help them experience the outdoors in a more equitable way, in a more inclusive way, and a way that helps them to thrive in their life. And the same is true of what we're trying to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes we have different playing fields. We have different starting points. And if we look to the margins, as we say, who's on the outside, who's not invited in the room, who's having the most challenge in our workplace, in our schools, in our communities, and if we can solve the challenge for those having the most trouble, everyone else will benefit as well. It's sort of that idea of all ships rise with the tide.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing the story.
Of course.
And let's go back to to your way you start, because I'm curious. You are communication strategist, and you work with multiple communities. What was the moment in your life when you realize that's going to be your life journey?
Oh gosh.
Was it the particular moment?
Yes, it was. And I love this question because I think so many of us are shaped by those core memories of early childhood. And for me, that was the moment. So I'm going to go way, way, way back. So I am the second eldest of 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls, no twins, no adoptions, not a blended family because people always ask. But my parents, many, many years ago, were actually ministers. And so I grew up the formative years of my childhood. So I was born in San Diego, California, and then in kindergarten, my parents moved us to this tiny island, Guam, which is a U.S. territory. So the tiny island of Guam in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it is 30 miles long, 8 miles wide, and you can go around the whole island in one day. You can probably go around twice. And they were ministers there. So their hope was to be there to help people, certainly with their faith. But if anyone has served in communities or in ministry, you know that before you can address the faith part, people just have everyday needs, right? Food in their belly, clothes on their back, a roof over their head. And so much of my parents' work actually was helping people with those basic everyday needs and resources. And so we were in community with people, helping them with all of those basic needs. And one of the most difficult things and expensive things was healthcare is one thing that I noticed, and that points to why I work in healthcare communications today, is because I wanted to be a part of solving that challenge that I saw so many people facing, because I believe that healthcare is a human right that we all deserve and have the right to thrive. We should have access to the things that will give us that reality in this world. So I think all the way back to childhood, being in community with people and being on the front lines with my parents of, again, food in your belly, clothes on your back, a roof over your head, just helping people with those very basic day-to-day things that I think we often take for granted, and I think are, for many people, things that we forget to be, innately grateful for, because we forget that not everyone has immediate or ready access to those very basic needs.
Incredible. Thank you for doing that.
Of course, absolutely. It's my parents, and it's shaped who I am and how I show up in the world, is to just sit with people, talk to people, get to know people, be in community. And to me, being in community is, a lot of it's about reciprocity, right? Mm-hmm. We both have something to give, and we both have skin in the game, and it's a give and take, right? We're constantly helping one another, meeting needs of each other in different ways, and we all have different talents to help meet the various needs of the people around us.
When you work with your clients, and again, your clients also come from various communities. Mm-hmm. And what is the Northern Star? I like using that expression because
I like it too.
Yeah. What is the Northern Star when you advise your clients?
It's always trust. My North Star, when I think about my day-to-day work, it does come back to trust. And there are lots of different definitions of trust. There's one that I really like that came out of this study. I think that was done initially in Italy, but it talks about the trust being 2 components of benevolence and competence. And the way they described it is the benevolence piece of, I believe that you care about what I care about. And the competence piece being, I believe that you have the ability to do what you say you are going to do. And to me, I like that definition of trust. Benevolence plus competence equals trust, because it's so simple to me. The benevolence of, yes, I care about what you care about, or at least that you care about it, and I'm going to do what I can within my power, within my ability and talents to help make that a reality for you. And so I think about that with my clients every day, as well as how can we build trust, certainly together in our relationship, but also for the people you're trying to reach. And whether you're trying to reach people with a product, a service, or an idea that will change the world, how do we do it in a way that meets the needs of those audience members who care about the same things that you care about, and how can you help fulfill that for them as well?
Thank you. And so you wrote your book. It's coming out. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it's coming out this fall.
October 28th, 2025, which feels both very far away and very close.
And what led you to the idea in communication, the price of nice?
Yes.
So I know that we will talk today about the positive, the toxic positivity, because you and I was a part of your webinar before we came to this conversation. It was very interesting. Would you give us a couple of words on what led you to the
Yeah.
idea of the price of nice?
Yes. So my book is called The Price of Nice: Why Comfort Keeps Us Stuck in 4 Actions for Real Change. And this book really is a reflection of the last at least 12 years, probably more like 20, of learnings from across my career. And I've been thinking about this book for at least that many years. And my daughter happens to be 12 years old. And I would say when she came into the world, it really lit this fire under me of I don't want to hand her the same world I was handed. And I had noticed that throughout my life, I was known for being really nice. And I was known for, being someone who wasn't difficult, someone who wasn't a challenge to work with, someone who was never angry. And I wore that for many years in my career, especially, but also in my home life and in my communities as a badge of honor. I joke that my late mother-in-law, Pearl, my husband's mom, she used to refer to me as precious, sweet Amira, almost like it was my government name. And so many other people started to refer to me that way. And so this idea, this persona of being the nice person, the nice girl, I really leaned into that for far too many years. And what I realized over time was that it came at a cost. There was a tax to being the nice one. And often that cost was being silent, was turning down the volume on my voice, and in many instances betraying my values and my boundaries. And that was a cost I didn't want to pay. And it certainly was a cost I didn't want my daughter to pay in her life. And I didn't want to raise her up in this world to be someone who had to sacrifice their voice, their volume, or their values, much like I had. And so I wrote a whole book about that.
Thank you, because I think in today's culture we spend too much attention about being positive and building this positive environment and
Yeah.
about us that at some point, and I heard you talking about this, becomes toxic.
Yes.
So can you say a few words about what is this toxic positivity that we are struggling today?
Yeah, I think that it stems from, and in my book, I write a lot about this, and a lot of the thesis of the book is that we have this cultural obsession with niceness. And part of where I believe that comes from is our obsession with comfort. I, for a long time, though I set it aside for too many years, I have been very comfortable. I can think as far back as 9 years old, I've been very comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right? Of, being willing to say the thing that might ruffle feathers, that might challenge, disrupt, or push the envelope. And that is a muscle that I think not enough people know how to work out and make stronger. And so it can apathy like a muscle does. You have to work it out, and it is hard to be uncomfortable, to feel like, oh, you made someone feel awkward, or someone feels challenged, so do they like me now? I also think there's a likability factor to why we lean into toxic positivity. We don't want to be uncomfortable, and we very much want to be liked. And I think we are socialized that way from birth, right? From the way we are taught to play in the playground, the way we are taught to behave in the classroom. It's about comfort and likability and following the rules. Here is the set of rules that have been handed to you. Only follow them and don't ask questions for why. And at least that is so much of the experience I believe I had as a child, and shaped why I leaned into and practiced being nice so much. But it comes at a cost. So I think a story I'd love to tell you about the toxic positivity. So before my corporate career, I actually worked in the nonprofit world, or non-governmental world, for any international listeners out there. And we had this CEO who was very well known and beloved in our community for the work that we were doing. Many would have called him a visionary, and very few people had any bad words to say about him. The challenge was, behind closed doors or within the walls of our organization, he was someone that bristled at critique. He was someone who did not accept or like feedback. And he was someone who ran our organization with that sort of toxic positivity, a smile, but there wasn't a lot of effectiveness to his work and his leadership, and there weren't any real conversations about his behaviors. And I think of him because he was known in the community for what we called, I'll call him Marty for the sake of anonymity, and I don't want to get sued, but we'll call him Marty. And he had this Martyism. So literally at every event, every donor meeting, every volunteer event, he had this saying that he started to become known for in the community that people would expect. He would always say, I don't know if I'm just sipping my own Kool-Aid. And it was just something that rolled off the tongue. And many people have heard that phrase before. And why it matters when I think about toxic positivity is we had this very big meeting coming up, our entire executive team. And within many workplaces, people will know and have heard the phrase sacred cows. Those are leaders, rules, processes that you don't touch. You don't get to change them. You don't question them. You don't touch them. You just leave them alone. We're all just going to accept that this is how it's always been done, or this is how it has to be. And that was very true of our organization. That was part of the toxic positivity. And Marty, I believe he was one of the biggest sacred cows of our organization. Nobody could question him. No one could give him feedback, and no one could say anything about his leadership or his behaviors. And so we had this really big meeting coming up. This was one of those once in a lifetime meetings where we had the chance to go to your neck of the woods, DC. We were going to Capitol Hill to sit down with a congressperson to ask for $9 million for this really big initiative and program that our organization was leading to help people in community. So we go to Capitol Hill, we sit down, and we are sitting with Congresswoman Jackie Spear and her staff in DC. And Marty finishes our pitch, our ask, and then he decides to drop his signature catchphrase. He says, I don't know if I'm just sipping my own Kool-Aid. And I felt like my eyes were bulging out of my head. The oxygen left the room. The Congresswoman's staff were completely frozen and their jaws were dropped and on the floor. And for those who don't know, Congresswoman Jackie Spear was with her congressperson at the time, who she was a staff person of back in the 70s, at a visit with the members of Jonestown and the Jonestown Massacre, which was 900 people, a mass unaliving with cyanide-flavored beverage. And that's actually where that phrase comes from. And Congresswoman Spear was a survivor of that day. She was actually hurt that day. And so that phrase that people sort of in a very quipped manner let roll off the tongue comes from a very tragic story and event in our history. And so he dropped this phrase in front of the very person you should not say that to, someone who was directly impacted by that terrible day in Jonestown. And Congresswoman Spear, with all the nerve, which to me is the antithesis of nice that I talk about in my book, she looked at Marty and she said, you really shouldn't say that to me. And by the way, it was Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid, which made me giggle that she corrected him. And so I say all that to say our executive team and our board of directors had never done the hard work of pushing back on our CEO. We all knew the origins of that phrase, and we had mentioned it to him before. But as we sat down in the prep meeting for that day on the Hill, we didn't correct him in that prep meeting. We didn't coach him to not use that language. And for many years leading up to this moment, we let that sacred cow, that thing you don't touch, you don't challenge, live. And we were leaning into and really living toxic positivity as an organization and as an executive team. And eventually, playing nice, it cost us. It cost us embarrassment. It cost us an opportunity. And it cost us that day, I think, in terms of relationships. And so I often tell people that story of we think that being toxically positive, we think that playing nice or being nice doesn't come at a cost until you have a moment like that that you will never forget. And I will never forget that moment in that room with Congresswoman Spear and realizing, you know, there are things our board of directors and our executive team could have done to avoid exactly this moment had we not been so dedicated to playing nice.
You're absolutely right. And to me, as a leader myself, how many times I thought of creating an environment within my team where we can talk things through.
Yeah.
And again, as a leader, I don't want to speak for my team. They probably say their own things. But again, my goal is I don't want to be liked. I want to get things done. I want to get things done. In your opinion, though, that's quite a story.
It
I
is.
got a little bit
I
of
know.
goosebumps right now
I
just
lived
listening
it.
to you. Oh
Every
my
time I
god.
tell it and think about it, I'm like, I can't believe that happened.
Oh gosh.
Like that
Yeah.
actually happened. It's one of those like, moments that you can't write into a script of the one thing he should not say to the one person you shouldn't say it to.
Yeah.
He did. And I cannot believe that just happened. And that's why my heart in that room in that moment sank. And I was just looking up at the ceiling like, please take me out of here. Please let me out of
Yeah.
here. This is so bad.
It's like, one of those moments when you become emotionally
Yes.
embarrassed for somebody
Yeah,
else
exactly.
sitting in the room,
Yeah,
right?
and almost an out of body experience. Like I said, it's a core memory. I will never forget that moment and that feeling. And that's why it's one of the stories I talk about in this book, because it was one of those lessons of this is the cost of playing nice.
And what is the opposite of being nice?
Nerve.
Nerve.
People
So what is nerve?
people think it's mean. I'm never asking people to be. I did not write a whole book asking people to be mean. That's not the call to action. It is to please have some nerve. And if nice is about likability and agreeability and maintaining the status quo, not rocking the boat, to me, the antithesis is nerve, and nerve challenges. Nerve disrupts the script. Nerve addresses what's broken. And nerve is about courage to say the thing or do the thing that moves us forward. Because niceness to me is about those who already have power continuing to have it. But I really think what we need is the nerve to audaciously say the quiet parts aloud, to ask bigger questions, and to really ask something along the lines of, who does this serve, and does it serve us still?
And how can you give maybe three highlights, three steps for people to use this strategy?
Yeah.
Because again, today there are quite a few communities that can benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to use questions. So in the book, people are going to find a lot of framing around inquisition as a strategy. And I think three easy questions that come up in my mind every day in the kind of work that I get to do to shift people's perspective and help them reimagine their behaviors. Very simple questions, what, so what, and what now? And so you could ask, what's the problem? So what? Why does that matter? Who is this affecting? And then the what now? What's one thing we can change and do? Because when I ask people to practice nerve over nice, they often think of big rebellion and throwing the tea into the bay and burning it all down. And sometimes the change we need is that. But most often, especially in our workplaces, in our homes, and in our communities, sometimes the change is one subtle shift. Maybe it's that you use more inclusive language. Instead of saying blind spot, say see around corners. Instead of saying invisible diseases and visible diseases, say non-apparent diseases and apparent diseases. Sometimes it's just a simple shift in your behavior, your perspective, and how you think about the world. That can be practicing nerve as well. And so I want people to really take the time to pause and shift their perspective, which is so much of what I provide in the tools that I'm giving people in this book. So for example, one of my favorite tools and steps in the book, I ask people to keep a creative journal. And this is because years ago in 2013, a consultant was helping my executive team come up with our new 5-year strategic plan. And we had gotten into that realm of sacred cows of this is how it's always been done. We have to do it this way. This is the only way we know. And so she wanted us to change our minds and our perspectives so that we could then change our behavior. So she asked us to do something very simple. Keep a creative journal. And every day, one of the exercises was to observe something brand new. And that could be anything. You could observe how a faucet drips water. You could observe, how a car parks or parallel parks, literally anything. She also asked us to take note of systems around us. So a system can be something as simple as how the printer at your desk works. A system can be as simple as your day-to-day task list and how you move through finishing your task list. And so what she was trying to do was help us to pause intentionally every day and to see how things work and to see where systems, where processes or things could be better, or maybe they were broken. And one of the most fun exercises for me was that observing systems. So one of the systems I wrote down was how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I tell this story a lot because it's so simple, and I actually do it with my students. I teach as a professor too. And one of the things I'll ask them to do when we're doing perspective shifting is, okay, in 12 steps or less, tell someone who's never had one before how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And the answers you get are so wide and deep reaching. Sometimes people will say funny things that make me giggle, like, you have to graduate high school and then get a job so that you have money so you can go to the store and buy bread and all the other ingredients, right? And some people start in the kitchen. Okay, grab the bread off the counter. And what it does is it makes people realize all of the assumptions that we have in our own perspective and our own lived experience of where a thing starts and how a thing works. And that we each have different experiences that could help the process be faster, be easier, be better, be more available to more people, or more interesting. I also ask students in this exercise to throw in a unlikely ingredient. Some people will throw in bananas or salt or a spicy jam instead of a sweet jam. Again, just to help people think about the world differently and shift their perspective. And that's what I'm asking people to do in this book. Is so many of us have been taught and socialized to think that nice people win, nice people get ahead. And I think we need to shift on that perspective, because nice is not always effective and nice is not always the most right thing that we need in the moment.
Absolutely. What I was listening and I thought it's so interesting how wide is the gap between some people are talking about that peanut butter jelly sandwich. You need to go to school so you can make money, and others you just show up in the kitchen and get your ingredients.
Right.
That was
It
to
tells
me,
you a lot about
yeah.
how people are brought up or what they have access to, right? And that's the whole exercise is, wow, I have a very different perspective. Some people are thinking about those logistics of, do I have enough money in my bank account to afford bread? I've only ever had it happen twice, but some people don't know what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich are. I have international students. I teach them. They're like, what is that? What are you talking about? And why would you eat that? That sounds awful, right? And so different experiences, different talents are brought to the table. And it really does make you go, I might need to widen my lens and think more expansively about the world and what other people could bring to this conversation so that we can make things work for all of us.
And in your opinion, who can benefit from your book the most? Who could be the audience that can take this book and take the steps after reading it and start moving forward?
Yeah, I want this book to be for everyone, but they make you choose.
Yeah.
That's how it works, because publishing is a business. So the core audience for this book are people who have very similar day jobs to me, and I would call them professional communicators. And the why for that is not because we're the only ones who are nice, but I learned many years ago in the world of communications, and why I love this, and it's been my job since forever, is that what people will do at any given moment in time is determined by how they see the world. And how they see the world is determined by the stories that we tell or the stories that we don't. And stories are made up of words and our language, and words shape worlds. I didn't come up with that, but it's said all the time, and many people have heard it, and it's very true. And so I want this book to land in the hands of the professional communicators of the world across every industry, across every sector, whether you're in government, nonprofit, or corporate, a big company, a small company. I want you to have this book because the stories that we are telling, whether it's about a product, a service, a community, a person, an idea, politics, you name it, those stories shape how people see the world, and it shapes what people will then do, the behaviors that they do or don't adopt. And so this is corely for communicators. But one of the things that I say even in the intro of the book is while this book isn't written to everyone, it can be for everyone, because everyone in their own right is a communicator. If you're a parent, you're a communicator. If you are a teacher, you're a communicator. If you are a neighbor, you are a communicator. If you're an elected or appointed official, we all have these different facets of life where we are helping to use words to shape the world that we all get to live in. And so we all have a responsibility to think about the stories that do get told and the stories that still need telling. And so this book really is for everyone who fancies themselves a communicator or a change maker in any facet of life.
Absolutely agree with you. And in today's world of technology and AI, that is been getting into every single segment and every single industry. I talk to my team, I talk to my children, and I say that there's only one thing that will help you to progress anywhere. It's communication. If you are a master communicator, you will succeed in this world. So that's why I think that your book is so timely right now for anyone, whether you're a leader, whether you are you can be leader without your title.
Right, exactly.
I believe in your organization, you do not need to be to have a title
the
to be
formal hierarchical title. We all lead in our own way.
Right. And the only way to do it is through communication.
Yes. Communication is how we connect as humans in every facet of life. That is, us sitting here, we're communicating with words, but you also communicate with your eyes, with your body language, right? That's all communication. And so it is the connection point between us. That's what makes community happen, is communication.
And that leads me to, if there is one chapter or there is one concept in this book that you would recommend for leaders, regardless of the leaders, what would that would be?
Oh, just one.
Oh,
I love it. I love it. I start the book with one of my favorite stories, the preface, because the preface is meant to be sort of the, well, why you? Why Amira? Why is Amira the one to write the book about the price of nice and why we should all care? And I start with a story from childhood. So I talk about how, I'm an 80s baby, but the 90s raised me. And I miss the 90s. I wish we could go back in time. If we were going to go back in time, that's what the decade I would choose personally. But in this story, I talk about how as a little girl, we didn't yet have cell phones and we didn't have like Instagram or TikTok, all these social media things that we all love to share our lives on now. But the one sort of surefire way to tell people that you had just gone on vacation and been somewhere absolutely fabulous was what we call vacation hair. And many people who grew up in the 90s will know it's just like the little cornrow braids with the little beads, especially if you had been somewhere tropical and fabulous. And so we had these two little friends, my sisters and I, who would come back from vacation every year with their vacation hair. And I'm a Black woman, and so are my sisters, but our two little friends were these blonde-haired, hazel-eyed little girls. And so they'd come back with these braids, and very quickly after they would have these really fuzzy, furry haystacks because their hair was so thin. And so they'd be begging my mom, can you please fix our hair? We want it to look like theirs, like my sisters and I. And so my mom would do it, and they'd sit down on her bedroom floor and she'd get to work trying to rebraid their hair. And there was this one year when little Amira, who was 9 years old, saw them and the dramatics. And for whatever reason, I kind of had a moment, and, they were asking questions and they were going through the motions of like, oh my gosh, this hurts so much. Like, is my hair falling out? Is it supposed to hurt this much? Like, does your head hurt this much when this happens? And little 9-year-old Amira was standing there in the doorway, and I snapped and I said, well, it's because it's not made for your hair.
I love that story. This is the second time I'm listening to it. I love it. I can imagine how you're doing this.
Yeah, I was just kind of really sassy, like, it's not for your hair. They're not for you. And my mom and my sisters just kind of stared at me, and so did the twins. And my little sister, like, sort of stifled a giggle, and I was sent off to the other room to get in trouble later. And when my mom came in later, she had said, you know, Amira, you can't say things like that. Even if it's true, you can't say things like that. And to me, that was the very first moment when I can think back to that would sort of encompass for me the price of nice. This idea that even if you are saying something that is true, that is right, that is even righteous, if you will, if it makes someone else uncomfortable, you are the problem. Now, my mom didn't intend for me to leave with that lesson, but it's the one that I took because it wasn't the only moment I had experienced something like that. And so to your question of the tool I want people to take, Charles Duhigg is an amazing professor, researcher, and writer who wrote this book called Super Communicators. I love it. It sits on my desktop. And he talks about how in life, as humans, we are often having one of three conversations. We're often having a practical conversation, which is about like setting plans and getting things done, getting to the task at hand. I'm almost always in a practical conversation. I am a September Virgo. If there are any other Virgos out there, September 14th, that's me. I'm a true Virgo. And so I'm always about the practical, like let's get down to brass tacks. What's the task list? What's the deadline? We've got stuff to do. Let's cut out the fluff and go. So that's the first conversation we're usually having, practical. The second is an emotional conversation, right, around feelings and how things are impacting you, and you want empathy and sympathy. And the last is a social conversation. So practical, emotional, and social, which is about connecting and identity. And that day with the twins, I was having a practical conversation. Like, your hair isn't made for braids. Yeah, your hair is falling out because your hair's too thin for this. So stop getting braids and your hair will stop hurting. That's what I was trying to communicate that day. Like, oh, there's a solution here. I'm practical, solution oriented. Stop getting these braids. For the twins, they were having an emotional conversation. They wanted empathy. They wanted someone to sympathize with them. And little Amira couldn't imagine how saying something like, oh, I'm so sorry your head hurts. That's so sad, was a solution. And so I wasn't going to do that. But the twins and I were having very different conversations. And I want leaders to recognize that that's still the world we live in today is, you know, as you move through your leadership journey, as you move through connecting with other humans in the workplace, in your home, in your school, in your place of worship, at your kids' school, whatever space you find yourself in, what kind of conversation are you having? And that will help you determine, how can I connect with this person who's sitting right across from me in the most powerful and impactful way in this moment? And you know, how do I practice nerve in this moment in a practical conversation, an emotional or a social conversation? It's going to look very different what kind of nerve you practice with the person who's across from you in that moment.
I admire you so much for this because since the day that we met about a year ago, you put those difficult concepts and such an easy stories to understand.
Oh, thank you.
And again, let's go back to connection because we are here for connected conversations. How do you recommend to build that connection for leaders? And again, you don't have to have a title to be a leader. Anybody can be leading organization or a social community. So
yeah.
any recommendations that you can make?
Lead from where you are, right? We hear that a lot, but it's true. And like you said, you don't have to have a formal title. Leadership looks like many things. And, you know, what do they say? Fake it till you make it. You have to, you know, step into the role sometimes before you're in the role. And so lead from right where you are. And leadership can be that you're the one that opens the conversation and says, you know what? Who's not at this table right now? In this conversation we're having in the workplace about this decision we're about to make, whose perspective isn't represented here? Or maybe it's that you pose a question or a challenge of, I know that we've been doing it this way for 10 years, but does this still serve us? And to even just start the conversation. And I find that so many ways to connect with people is to just be the one who's willing to go first. I want more people to be the one to go first, to ask the question, to challenge the room, to pose the question in the kindest way possible with the intent to get to a solution, to a different kind of impact. And I think that's one way you can connect with people. There's so many people that I find who say, I had that question too. Or you know what, I thought that also, but I was afraid to say it out loud. I was afraid to ask it or to be the one to go first. And I think a lot of times we can connect with people and have these connected conversations when someone has the nerve to be the one to go first.
As we all learned through the pandemic, how we need community around us. And artificial communities on social media can damage us even more. And that's the reason why when we started this podcast, I said, everything is going to be in person because that's how we connect. During the conversation, I said, I will travel. And so here I am in San Francisco to meet you because I want to have this conversation and have this vibe that we are having right now. So when we have this, I'm going to paddle back. So what, in your opinion, for the community in the social media world to be seen, to be heard, to be connected, what are the ingredients for that community is so important today for this connection?
Yeah, I think it can happen on social media too, but I think it's part of what you just said. The fact that you set the intention that you're going to be here live and in person with me and all of your other guests, that is a beautiful thing, is that you know and understand how you want to build community with people and you've set that intention. And because you've set that intention and written it down or said it aloud, you've created the space for the things right. It costs money to fly out here from where you are and to have a hotel and all of those things. But because you set that intention, you've now built, your days and your life and your finances and your resources around making that happen. And I think the same is true for how we build community in every space that we enter, whether it's at school, in a place of worship, in your neighborhood, is to set the intention for how you want to build and be in community with people. And I do think you can do that on social media too. I joke because I'm an elder millennial and I did not want another thing to sign into. So I only downloaded and created a TikTok in March of this year. Very behind, a little embarrassed to say, and everyone keeps teasing me, but I finally did it because I wanted to be able to reach more people with this book and with this message of, do something other than nice, is to have some nerve and move through the world in that way. And I set that intention of how I wanted to create community across even a digital space and be in conversation with people. And, I'll post a video once a week on this topic, and here's what you can expect from me to help you. And I'm giving people, once a day I do in under 60 seconds, nice versus nerve. And I give them one behavior that they can change to practice nerve. And I tell them what the nice version looks like so that they have a really practical, here's one thing I can change that is a little different that will help me, work out that muscle of practicing nerve so I could get stronger and better at it every single day. And much like you, I set that intention of once a day I can give people one thing that they can change, one thing they can do. And that has helped me to build community because people are saying like, oh, wow, that was really helpful. I hadn't thought of it that way. And here's another question that I have. And so now we're in this conversation back and forth over nice versus nerve and a specific challenge that this, internet friend and stranger who I didn't know before. And now we're in conversation and others are there too, commenting like, oh, I struggle with that too. Thank you for asking that question, or thank you for saying that. And we're building this community that is rich of people helping people. People come to me and are like, oh, you're an expert. I'm like, no, look at the comment section. There are all these other people in our community who have things to say and things to add. And we're building this community together. And I have something to give, but they also have something to give. And that's beautiful. And that's because I set that intention to say, this is how I want to connect with people and engage. And whether it's digitally or in person and in every space you can think of, part of it has to be that you set that intention for how you want to be in community with people and what you want them to get out of it, what you want to get out of it, and what you're bringing to the table. What do you have to give from your experience, from your talents that can add value? And someone else brings a different ingredient, if you will. And we all have these different ingredients that make this beautiful meal where we get to break bread together and be in community.
That's incredible. Again, that just shows that people want to connect.
They do.
People want to belong to something bigger than themselves.
Yes.
And community can be built
anywhere
and around anything.
That's right.
Hopefully positive initiative.
Right.
Yeah,
But it can be anything.
positive.
My daughter's in like a Dungeons and Dragons club at school. It can be built around like a game. It can be built around a show that you love. It can be built around like a book club that you're all reading the same thing. It can be built around the sector that you work in. But you're right. It's community can be built across so many different interest areas and different kinds of people. And I really think it's about realizing that we all have something to give. I have skin in this, you have skin in this, and we all get to build what this looks like together from different perspectives and different viewpoints and lived experiences.
And in your opinion, what does make community resilient today?
What makes community resilient?
Today, yes, in today's world.
What makes community resilient? I really think that it is that people see in one another that there's so much that we have in common, that so many of us are working towards the same things, right? I talk a lot about my 12-year-old daughter. I want her to inherit a world that is different from the one I inherited. I want her to have more rights than I had, a lot of which is regressing right now, whether it's voting rights, for reproductive rights, you name it. But I'm fighting for her to have a world where she has more choices and more autonomy, and I think that gusto that I have for that, there's so many other caregivers and parents who have that same gusto and that same desire for the humans that they care about, whether it's little girls or little boys or a neighbor or for themselves. And so there's this shared commonality, this shared goal that we're all working towards of, even if the choice you make is different than mine, I want you to have the ability to make that choice. Yeah. And that's something that we can share, right? That's a shared value of I want to care for the people that I love, and I believe in autonomy. And so many of us share that sort of value system, even if our choices and the outcomes are different. And if we can come together on that shared value that we agree and align on, I think that helps us to be resilient in the communities that we are advancing and that we're participating in. Is what are the values that we share that we can work towards, and can we be connected in conversation even over the ones that we don't agree on, and sit across from each other and find some common ground to work towards something together.
And that leads me to my next question. Again, you work in communication, you connect people. How do we, maybe you can give us advice to our listeners and advice, how can we work within the communities or between various communities, and how can we resolve tension? There are a lot of tensions today. How can we resolve tension between different stakeholders and yet stay true to the values?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would offer is a reframe. I don't think resolving tension is always the goal. And I don't think it has to be. I think as a communicator and as someone who also works in the space of like health equity and diversity, equity, and inclusion for workplaces, we often talk as practitioners about how we hold tension with intention. If that makes sense. Yeah. It's easier when you see it written down, but we hold the tension with intention, meaning that resolving the tension that exists that you can cut with a knife because it's so thick in the air isn't always the goal. Sometimes the goal is to ask a different question. Sometimes the goal is to just be in conversation. Sometimes the goal is to find at least one shared value. So we may not remove or resolve the tension on this issue here, but maybe there is a shared value that we agree on. Even when I think about healthcare, for example, what we all experienced with the global pandemic that was COVID-19, there were a lot of tensions around people's different beliefs of how that should be handled and whether or not to get a vaccine, for example. But one of the shared values that so many people in community had was, I do want to care for my neighbor. I do want to care for my grandparents who might be ailing. I do want to care for my parents, for my children, right? So there was this shared value of, okay, you want to care for the people that you love. We might go about that differently, but we could be in conversation about the fact that we all want to care for the people that we love and we want them to live long and healthy lives where they are thriving and have well-being. So sometimes the intention is not to remove the tension, but to at least be in conversation and find what are the values that we do share and start from there. And over the course of connected conversations, we might remove the tension eventually, but that isn't always the end goal. Sometimes we can still find community, we can still find relationship, and we can still find positive outcomes just from being in conversation with people and finding ways to have a relationship in the midst of having very different beliefs about the outcome or the actions that we might take to address a particular issue, policy, you name it.
Yeah, that is such a good way to look at it, because again, people try to avoid conflict sometimes so hard.
It's that comfort I talked about again. That's why we're so
Yeah.
nice, because I don't want to make anyone
Yeah,
uncomfortable, and I don't want to be
right.
uncomfortable is how people will often feel.
You're so right about it, because conflict by itself, it's a good thing.
It's healthy.
It's how we handle the conflict sometimes get off track,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. There are tools to do conflict healthily, right?
Yeah.
Conflict is a healthy part of a relationship. So when I hear people say things like, oh, we never fight, I'm like, oh, that's a red flag.
Precisely, because conflict could be the way to bond
Yes.
in a healthy way.
And it's also where growth happens. I tell people the discomfort you're feeling in this moment with that behavior you changed, with that decision you made that is maybe different from the way you've made it before, that's where growth happens. So I want you to sit in that tension, and I want you to, feel what you feel and think what you think and know that this is where the growth is happening. And so then you ask yourself those three questions I mentioned: the what am I feeling, the what, the so what, and what now. So, all right, I feel uncomfortable. So what? What does that mean? Did I die? No, I'm fine. And so what now? What's one thing that I can do? What's one step I can take now that I've, made this decision? I'm uncomfortable. I made someone uncomfortable. I ruffled the feathers. What can I do now? What's that one next step? Like, don't try to boil the whole ocean. Take one step, however small, just do the one thing. Ask yourself, what, so what now?
And I love the idea how you're bringing values here, because again, be curious and ask the question where we overlap.
Yes.
Because we could be overlapping on something that works for both of us. We find that value and start working, because we might disagree on little things, but we definitely will find something that we both agree on.
Yes, absolutely.
And make that first step on that.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to look at things. So, and as we continue talking about the leadership, because again, doesn't matter what position you take within community, things are changing very rapidly in today's world. What qualities today's leader need to possess to be successful in communication and leading the community, in your opinion?
Well, I'm going to say nerve, of course.
Right.
That's a great quality to have, is to have nerve. Be someone willing to ask bigger questions, to challenge, to disrupt, and to ask, does this still serve us? Is there a different way to do this? Who is not at this table? I think nerve truly is one of the qualities I would like more leaders to show up into the world, workplaces, communities, politics, you name it, with. So show up with nerve where you can. I think there are many people who talk a lot about authenticity. I don't like that word, and I don't like the framing and the idea of authentic leadership. I talk about it as chosen self, not authentic self. I don't show up in the workplace as my authentic self. As a Black woman in corporate America, I actually don't believe there is any space where it is safe for me to show up as my full authentic self. So what I talk about is my chosen self. And I want people to know that that doesn't mean faking it, and that doesn't mean not being who you are. To me, chosen self is in this moment, in this room, depending on who I'm in community or conversation with, what conversation we're having, what project we're having, what company it is, that this room may be safe for me to be this chosen self. And that, I think, is a more realistic framing in today's world of work, is our chosen self. In particular, because it might be safer and it might be wiser to be your chosen self in any given moment. And I think that's important. So as a counter to what people might say authenticity, I would say, chosen, or you could call it aligned self, right? Am I at least being aligned with my values in this moment? So your aligned self, I think, is a really important quality to have and to show up as a leader with, because when you show up as your chosen self, I think it opens the door and gives permission for other people to do the same. People are watching you, whatever kind of leader you are, whether that's formal leadership or just how you choose to show up and your aura that you bring. People are watching, and you never know who you might be influencing and who you might be giving permission to, that says, oh, wow, I love the way Elena showed up, and I feel like I can do that too. You give people that permission, and I think that's so important. I would also say another leadership quality that I love to see in people is truly someone who is open to shifting their perspective. So it's growth mindset, I think, is what we'd call it in the world of leadership and coaching. I don't like that phrase, but whatever. It's the one people know. That growth mindset of, I'm willing to admit I may have been wrong on this. And I'm willing to shift my mind. I'm willing to adopt a new idea. I'm willing to say, oh, I hadn't thought of that way. Let me rethink how I'm showing up because I have this new information. I think that's so important, to be the kind of person who can receive new data and information and say, oh, let me shift how I think about that. Let me shift how I move through the world now because I have new information. That's really important. And that goes along with the last one I offer, is be willing to be the kind of leader who says, I don't know.
Yes, I agree with you. All three, and particularly authentic leadership. Sometimes it just that's my weakness, because I get so tired of listening about this authentic leadership. Okay, well, I'm Russian. If I'm going to start showing up as my Russian self, trust me, it's not going to be very
Fully.
good.
Right. And context
Received,
matters. And I think
right,
that's such a great example of what I mean. Like your full Russian self in the context of a corporate
Yeah.
American boardroom,
It's not
right?
going to
It
be,
may
yeah.
be perceived very differently than if you were in a boardroom in Russia. And so
Right.
that's why I tell people, like, you have to really pause and ask, do you really mean authentic self? Because, my husband and daughter tease me, there's my at-home voice, and then there's my corporate voice. And like, if I showed up as my full authentic self with all the language and things that I use, like, I might get in trouble.
Right. Yeah. There is going to be professional. It's going to be professional.
Right.
Lena is going to be fun. Lena in some situations, and we
Yeah.
really need to be
And that's
making
okay.
sure.
It's okay to
Right.
pivot based on the community that you're in. Like I said, that's not about being fake. In some cases, and I write about this a lot in the book, I talk about it as sometimes that is about survival. And unfortunately, with the way the world we live in has been constructed, sometimes survival is the choice that I have to make. And I know that as a Black woman in corporate America, I would not survive and I would not have a job if I showed up as my full, authentic self.
Yes, and I'm sure that today a lot of people might benefit from this.
Yes, yeah. And I want my daughter to have a world where she can be her full, authentic self. And so I'm fighting for that. I'm working towards that. And I think if more people practice nerve, which I write about in the book, we can get towards that world. But we're not there yet. So today I choose my chosen self, my aligned self that is aligned with my values, not the full, authentic Amira.
And if today some of our listeners decide to start a community or community initiative, what would you recommend them to start with?
I would say it's really important, based on my own experience of whether it's I've built a lot of like community groups, whether it was activist groups, political groups, parent teacher conference groups, you name it, to listen more than you talk. to go into that community or members of that community and let them answer the question of what do you need? What resource do you need? And I think that's really important, is a true leader and someone who is building community understands that when you build community, you don't want to be the kind of person who wants a kingdom to rule.
Yes.
You want a foundation to build on. And that's often how I describe the kind of leadership I try to practice and am building towards. I don't need subjects to rule. I'm not a queen in a throne that you must defer to and bow to. I want a foundation to build, because to me, a foundation, the way I think about it, is that in a foundation, there are many bricks. And in this lifetime, I may lay one brick. Maybe I lay 3 bricks, and then whoever comes after me gets to add on to that foundation, and they get to lay their brick, and their brick is going to be very distinct and different from the brick that I laid. But we all get to build this thing, this foundation, and it's going to look differently with every iteration and every generation because of the brick you lay and the brick that I lay. But my job is to lay a brick. I don't get to lay all of the bricks and decide what this looks like. I just get to do my part.
And from what I'm listening, we start with why, right? What problem we are solving,
Yes.
rather than just get together because it feels good,
Right.
right? Or just because maybe I will benefit from it, or I
You
want to
can
get paid.
ask those same 3 questions of what? What are we solving? Well, so what? Why does this matter, and who does it matter to? And what now? As a community together, what can we do now to address this problem that we're solving for the people that it matters for? Those same questions, I think, apply in this too, to building community.
And if we are going to be connecting communities together, building coalitions, which I know that you do that too, if you can give us a strategy or maybe a tool, what would be that? What would be your recommendation?
You have to do it together and with the people that are most impacted. I'll go back to the start of our conversation where we talked about the curb cuts, right? And part of the idea of building the curb cuts is to solve for the margins. And I actually learned, that was a lesson I learned from Mari Matsuda, who is actually a lawyer and an activist who teaches at the University of Hawaii, who would talk about look to the margins, meaning who is most impacted, who has the least amount of resources, who is definitely not at the table or in the conversation. If you look to the margins, that is one of the most strategic and kindest and most sincere things that you can do in building community and in building being a leader within communities, is look to the margins. What do they have to say? Because those who are living in these communities, those who are most impacted, are the ones who often have the best solutions in mind. You don't need to come in and to be anyone's savior and to say, here's what we're going to do for you. You need to do things with people, in community with people, and to let them tell you. That's why I say to listen more than you talk, and to ask, well, what do you need? And why does it matter? And what can we do now about it? Those people at the margins, I've never met one who didn't have an answer.
That is incredible. That leads me to my next question. And I know that we've been talking here for quite a bit, but that I cannot not to ask this question. How, when you are going into the community or you're connecting communities together, again, maybe you can give us a little bit of a few tools here. How do you make sure that all these diverse voices from different communities or community leaders or members of the communities are brought to the table? How do you make sure that those decisions that are made, those are decisions made with in the consideration of all diverse voices?
Yeah.
Because again, we want to make sure that everybody is included, and we want to make sure that even those who do not talk and quiet, we want to get their input.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be intentional in how you build things. And I think in the society we live in, particularly within a United States context, is we are very hierarchical. And we have a very specific way of there has to be one leader. And I grew up in a community. I mentioned my parents were ministers, and in the culture and community I grew up in the islands, there was a lot of sharing of resources and sharing of responsibility. There wasn't one figurehead ever of things. It really was about this idea of mutuality and reciprocity. And so I always go back to those early origins of I have something to give and to contribute, but so do you. And how do we work together in mutuality and reciprocity of we're caring for one another. And so it is about being that person who looks around the table in the room and says, okay, who's not here? We need to pause. We can't move forward with this project. We can't move forward with this decision because I don't see someone represented from XYZ department, from XYZ community, from XYZ perspective. And we need to go back to the drawing board. And sometimes being that person, you'll get labeled as disruptive, difficult to work with, stalling progress. And that is part of the cost of practicing nerve, right? The nice thing to do would be to just be quiet and be silent and let things go forward. But who does that serve? Who does that serve? It doesn't serve everyone. And we're going to get to a point down the line where someone realizes, oh, this doesn't work for that community. Well, you didn't have them at the table.
Right.
You never asked them what they needed, and you didn't include that perspective. And so I think that part of it is each of us being accountable and being a thoughtful enough person to say, I have a voice, and what that voice can do is to look around the table and to ask that question. Who does this serve? Who is missing, and what can we do now to solve for that? And each of us has the power to do that. And maybe you don't have the power that is formal in an organization, but maybe you have a relationship with a leader to go say, hey, leader XYZ, you have more influence, you have more power in the company. And I noticed that we don't have XYZ represented. And I would love your partnership in making sure that we address that. Sometimes that's what you can do, is to pose the question to someone who does have the power or the privilege to make that change happen and to take action. But we all have a voice, and you can use your voice in whatever way you feel safest. And, whether you're practicing nerve at a 2 on the dial or a 10 on the dial is up to you and whatever safety you feel in that space. But we each have the power to use our voice in some way, shape, or form. We all have eyes and ears and the ability to go, this room looks homogenous. We all look the same. We're all at the same title level. Maybe we're all at the same socioeconomic status. I wonder who's being left out of this conversation right now and whose needs aren't being considered. But you have to be a thoughtful enough person to pause and to have that moment to say, this room looks a little too same.
Same, yeah. So being intentional.
Yes.
Be curious.
Yeah. And that takes work, right? Curiosity is also like nerve. It's like a muscle. Right? Being intentional is a practice, and that's why in the book I even call them the tools I'm offering people. I call them promising practices, not best practices. I don't believe in best. I call them promising practices, meaning that you're going to practice, a particular tool differently than I would, but it is a practice, which means you do it more than once and you do it over and over again, and you practice this until you get closer to being good at it. You're never going to get perfect, but you're going to get better at it each time you do it. And so intention is a practice. Curiosity is a practice. Inclusion is a practice. Diversity is a practice. And you have to be intentional to pause and to think, there's something I can do here. I can use my voice to practice being curious, being intentional, being inclusive, and making sure we have the diversity represented of voices, lived experiences, age groups, genders, you name it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in any community and in a business, we are going to benefit because, again, the more voices, the more experience. Because, again, I like to talk to my team about this, the way that I am a business person, which means that I have blind spots. But when I have the team that comes from the different backgrounds and different experiences, that just closes all my blind spots around me. Because again, if we all think the same way, it just means that we look straight, we don't look
around the corners, right?
So and then those are all the areas that we could be
missing. Imagine.
Or we could be attacked. We could be like
That's
throwing
right.
things around.
Yeah.
So that's the only way to close that bubble, so to speak.
And it matters because it's a form of bias, right? As human beings, I tell people bias doesn't make you a good or a bad person. It's just a part of the human condition. It's literally how our brains work. So we all have a bias for sameness, meaning I like people that are like me. That's normal. You're not a bad person because of that. That is a bias, and it's literally how our brain works. It's a shortcut of if you look like me, sound like me, or similar age to me, I'm more likely to be drawn to you. And so in order to work against that bias to make sure we don't have a homogenous room, meaning everyone looks the same, sounds the same, is the same age, you have to be intentional to mitigate that bias, to say, I need to make sure that I surround myself with people that are not like me. That takes intention. What does your friend group look like? What does your executive team look like? What does your neighborhood look like?
yeah.
That takes intention. That's why we have so many homogenous communities and friend groups, because it is an innate bias to us as humans. We like sameness because sameness feels safe. In our minds, we equate sameness to safeness. So be intentional about, does my community look like a mixed bag of nuts, or does it all look like almonds or all walnuts? Like, I know I need all of them, the pecans and the peanuts and the sunflower seeds. I need a whole mixed bag of nuts. That does take intention. You have to do that intentionally.
Precisely. Well, Amira, thank you so much. I am pretty sure
course.
everybody got very motivated by your discussion.
Thank
And
you.
that being said, where can we find the book? Because it's coming out
It
September,
is.
you said, right?
October
October,
28th,
October.
2025. And you can find the book, all of my speaking engagements, my book tour, podcasts like this that I'm participating in at amirabarger.com. Everything is there. And I'm new on TikTok, blowing up, suddenly very popular. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn, but I am at Amira Barger, keep it simple, on all the social channels that you can think about there. At Amira Barger, and amirabarger.com is where you can find it. And the book is wherever books are sold, from Barnes & Noble to Bookshop to your local Costco to Amazon, you name it, even your local indie bookstores, where you can rent it out at your local library too.
Thank you very much. We are going to be posting all this information in
Thank you.
in the footnotes of our podcast. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And Amira, if there is anything that we haven't discussed today and you want to leave our listeners with one takeaway from this discussion, what that would be?
I will leave you with what I leave my daughter with. She's 12. I mentioned every morning before school, and it's a little different than what people think I would send her off with, but I say to her, don't do anything I wouldn't do, which isn't much. And I say that as permission because I grew up in a world that told me to shrink and to be silent and to be afraid of change. And I don't want my daughter to do that. So it is my morning mantra to her to be brave. And it is, in essence, permission. So go out there, don't do anything I wouldn't do, which isn't much.
Well, thank you very much, Amira, again for joining us on the Connected Conversations. And thank you for everyone to join in our community. Please help us to grow our community. My team will be very grateful if you give us a like or share us on social media platforms. I'm not doing it by myself. I'm doing it with my team. My team is helping to create this podcast in 20 different countries. We truly appreciate your support. So give us a like and share us on any platform of your choice. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you for tuning in into Connected Conversation. We truly value your feedback and would love to hear from you. Please let us know what story you would like to hear next. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Let's keep the conversation going and let's continue to inspire each other. Let's stay in touch. Thank you.